Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom, and this is a fantasy movie review. Now, I'm a big fan of fantasy films. I've reviewed a few on this channel, and I've always been a fan of like the older ones like Thor the Conqueror, Barbarians, that sort of thing, the kind of lower budget, big movie films that maybe fly under the radar of most people. And I'll probably get round to reviewing them on this channel at some point. I was never really a huge fan of the sort of the newer CGI sort of infused ones, but in doing these reviews, I've come to sort of say that there are a couple of ones that I have enjoyed. So we come to this one, Dragon's Rage. Now, in the UK, it's known as Dragon's Rage, but in the US, it's actually known as Knights of Bloodsteel, and it's actually got names from other countries as well. I think Canada, it's called Dragons of Blackrock. So there's a few different titles of what this actually is. And this is actually a mini-series rather than an individual film. But here in the UK, it's packaged as a film, albeit a long one. Now, you'll sort of see from the UK cover, it's kind of, you know, very much like a big dragon and then stuff like that, and very much fantasy archetypes. In the US version, the cover is especially like Lord of the Rings, I think. No, I was actually quite looking forward to watching this movie. Looking at the sort of the screenshots on the back, I haven't seen it before. You know, there's a decent amount of like, you know, makeup and sort of costumes. Oh, wow, this actually might be a bit of a hidden gem. Now, unfortunately, this film was a bit of a missed opportunity, and I'll come on to why in just a second. So to give you a very sort of brief outline of the plot, it's in this universe. There's something called Bloodsteel, and this is a kind of MacGuffin, if you like, that is. The best way to describe it, it's almost like a super fossil fuel that is used from everything to power sort of steampunk style machinery to fuel to anything from lenses and glasses. It pretty much does everything really. So there's not a discernible sort of power type as such, but it pretty much does everything in this world, and it's running out. And there's virtually sort of only sort of scraps here and there, and then once you have it, it has a finite lifespan. So there's an artifact called the Crucible, which is the original source of this sort of element, and it's kind of been lost in the ages and whatnot. And we have this bad guy called the cheesily named Dragonite, who looks like he should have come out from a Power Rangers film, I've got to say, and he kind of wants this artifact for his own sort of nefarious means. To be fair, he actually has a legitimate reason. His son is in some sort of coma and he wants to bring out that. So he's not just purely a selfish mean. There is that to it as well. So I suppose, you know, he gets points for that. And the kind of the good guys, if you like, are a mixture of humans, elf, and interestingly goblins, and they kind of form they have like a sort of council of elders almost, and we have like one of the people there is Christopher Lloyd, and he's like kind of like this elf sort of wizard type, and he sort of foretells a prophecy really, where there's going to be these 4 knights that are going to try to quest ultimately to try and recover the Crucible and stop Dragonite from getting his hands on it, and therefore, you know, stopping the spread of evil and what have you. The interesting thing here, of course, is that this power itself can ultimately corrupt. Very much like the Lord of the Rings, it has a very much a Lord of the Things vibe, in the fact that we've got a group of heroes questing for an artifact that is that could potentially corrupt the innocent, so to speak. So there we're introduced really to the sort of the 4 main characters. You've kind of got a female elf who is the sort of a relation to Christopher Lloyd's sort of elf wizard type. I think he's the daughter or granddaughter or something, or she is, sorry. You've got a kind of wandering barbarian type who's kind of on a mission of revenge. You've got a sort of a rogue, I guess you would call him, and he's kind of this sort of con man, sort of salesman type. And then you've got this like goblin. Well, he's actually, I'm not really sure what he's supposed to be originally, but he kind of he ends up kind of getting infected with this sort of like a magical side, so he ultimately becomes sort of like the mage almost. So it's very much almost like a Dungeons and Dragons style sort of quest ultimately with these 4 characters, and they're sent off to first of all retrieve a map to try and find out the location of the Crucible, and then ultimately go and get the Crucible themselves. The whole time they're sort of followed by Dragonite sort of minions and fight various CGI dragons along the way. So that's the basic plot. So, okay, I guess I started with what I liked about this film. It does have some good cinematography. I think technically it's fairly well made. There's some good sort of stunts and things like that, and some of the action looks reasonably well choreographed. I think the sort of the sets and the actual costumes and stuff look pretty good. And I mentioned it before. Some of these characters have, you know, the goblins stuff and elves have quite makeup. I think the elves are interesting because they have kind of fangs, so they almost look like vampire elves, which I thought was quite cool. And I quite like the goblins' makeup. I wasn't so keen on Dragoneye himself. He doesn't look too bad in the still picture, but when you sort of see him walking around and stuff, he looks a bit rubbery. And like I said, he reminds me of like one of these Power Rangers bad guys or that sort of thing. So, you know, there's that. Now, the real problem here is that, as I said, this is actually made as a mini-series, and so I'm going to go straight on what I have the main issue with. So this is nearly a 3-hour movie, and this can't sustain that amount of time to watch it. It's quite boring, to be frank. Watching this for 3 hours, if this was edited down to a normal 90-minute movie, I think it probably would have fared a lot better, personally. And the thing is, the story doesn't lend itself to a 3-hour film. It's not an epic story. It's a relatively straightforward story, padded out with endless meandering and stuff like that, and it just becomes boring to watch. And I really wanted to like this film, and I like fantasy films, and I was just kind of, oh, please, you know, please just get, how long have we got left? It was unfortunately that was ultimately what was wrong with it. And it doesn't help. The other problem is the acting is so over the top, especially from I have to say, the female elf character. Now, I'm not sure if this was supposed to be on purpose, to be honest with you, but it almost acts like it's in a pantomime, and it's very distracting, and it's, you know, not good. Some of the sort of the reactions, and not just her, to be fair, but the reactions people have and the way they sort of deliver dialogue, it's so unbelievable cheesy. I mean, this makes stuff like Xena and Hercules look like high art, I think. So disappointing acting, stretched out over a nearly 3-hour period in not too much of an interesting story, to be honest with you, that could have been cut down to 90 minutes. So unfortunately, this is a pretty disappointing movie experience, I have to say. The CGI effects are relatively cheap looking. So I think there is, I believe, like 2 or 3 maybe sort of dragon encounters, and again, I don't think you needed to have these. You could have just had maybe one, and it would have been, they could have spent the CGI, the money on the CGI to make it look that much better. It's not the worst I've seen, I have to say, but it's certainly on the sort of the below average scale, even if you're talking about sort of fantasy B movies. Obviously, yes, it's a TV movie, and I always say I can't judge a film too badly based on the budget, because obviously they're only going to be able to do so far. But just to point out that the CGI I didn't think was particularly good, and we see a lot of also these sort of steampunk style contraptions that are kind of going around. I think there's some sort of quite obvious plot holes and things like this, and you know, a lot of like dumb things that people do. For example, when they eventually discover this map, they can't read it first of all. They have to get someone to decipher it, and they literally decipher it right next to some bad guys, so they overhear it and things like that. And it's just, I don't know, it's just some very dumb basic stuff. And like I said, to me, this was just done to sort of pad out this running time to make it into a miniseries when it just didn't need to be. I wouldn't like to know why they decided to do a miniseries rather than a kind of standard film. I guess if they already had the costumes and plot and everything, I suppose it was, you know, cheaper almost to get, like, it was done in 2 parts or whatever, so you're getting double the exposure, I suppose, for the money. So I guess that's probably why it happened. It certainly isn't the worst film of this type, I have to say, but it's below average, and this is based on B movie standards, I have to say. It's probably better than some of the Asylum films that I've seen, because they are really terribly bad. But ultimately, it's not as good as, say, for example, the 2 Dungeons and Dragons sequels, or even Blood of the Beasts, which is the sort of the Beauty and the Beast one that I sort of watched recently, and I've got a few more of these to watch as well. So I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. I thought it's quite below average, unfortunately, and quite boring to watch, which I'm sad to say, because I thought this one was going to be a bit of a hidden gem. Unfortunately, I was wrong about that. So have you seen it? Don't forget, this is actually called Dragon's Rage in the UK. Knights of Bloodsteel in the US, and various other types. I think it's Dragon's Eye in Japan, Dragons of Blackrock in Canada, stuff like that. There's quite a few variations on the title. Anyway, leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.